Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, I think my star is off a little bit, eh? Move that over here. I'm back. Sorry, so last week I was feeling kind of sick, but what the deal is here, I guess, is we've got these forest fires right down the road from us. And so it's been very hard for me to breathe because I pretty much had my asthma under control for the past few years, but we've got lots of smoke in the air, so the air quality is really, really low. And so, yeah, a lot of low air quality out here. So it's been making me hard to breathe. So last week, my sickness was, I had like a cold, but it was double bad because of the air quality. Anyhow, so survived that. Air quality, still really bad. I woke up this morning and there was ash all over my car. So that was kind of crazy. All the ash over the car. Yeah, anyhow, there you go. That's what happened there. What else? Just been parenting. Doing the parenting thing, living my life. Lots going on. They premiered a musical about my mother in the UK that Elton John is working on. Him and his friend Jake did like from Scissor Sisters wrote 15 songs based on my parents' life, which is really weird. It's something that I never thought I'd say. I recently got in touch with some of the folks from the musical, so I might get a chance to see it. I don't know yet. Fingers crossed. We'll let you know. Yeah, I had a little shaving incident and had to cut it lower and lower, and then it got really low, and then I looked like I just had a goatee and like I was about to sit in my pickup truck and do a YouTube video about politics. So I decided to just shave it all off for right now. So there you go. There's baby Jay. I'm gonna do the Don Johnson 5 o'clock shadow. Maybe get some white blazers, no socks, that kind of thing. My couch sinks, so I'm like slowly like, so anyway, it was great. By the time of the talk, I'll be like this. And then, when Jesus did, it'll just be a little hat. So yeah, so lots going on. And I'm going to tell you guys, like, honestly, that is, it's a lot to take in when other people tell your stories, tell your stories and tell your, embrace your mother, and you kind of have to share your parents with the world. It's really weird. So you can either be, oh, thank you, Zoe, for that kind comment. You can either be, you love your parents, but then everybody loves them more, or they hate your parents and they hate them. You can never, it's really kind of weird. It's really strange. I've had to talk a lot about it with my analyst, about this kind of stuff, because it really does. It's really strange. It's not normal. So there you go. You have to live with this, and it can cause a lot of like weird, like inner thoughts and stuff. And, feel like, you're missing out on a part of your mother's life, even though she's gone, but it's happening again, and it's a lot. But we're also still hard at work at our doc, which I'm really excited about. I'm really hoping that I can get my dad to be interviewed. I've been trying, but but I don't think he wants to do it, but I hope he will do it. Because I think it's really show a side of him that not a lot of people have seen, or a lot of people don't understand. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So here we are, folks. I've been reading. I have not seen the musical. I hope I get to see it. It's in the UK, so I'll have to go to England to see it. So we'll see. I've talked with a few of the people who are writing and producing it, and we'll see. Yeah. Anyhow, so what are we doing here? We're doing revolution, folks. We are doing the revolution. We're doing it the only way we know how right now, and that is online. So here we are, the dream we all dreamed of. What else is going on? I just trying to keep everybody up to date. The world is a mad place, you know. I just saw this thing on the about. I was watching this thing about how they didn't realize that our vaccinations didn't keep us from being contagious, and that wasn't told to us, and we all had vaccines, and I think that was kind of weird that people aren't talking about that. I just saw Donald Trump say that we needed to figure out a way to get together and have get countries to talk, get Ukraine and Russia to have a conversation and try to end this thing in peace. Which it's like, okay, so the world is weird, man. The world just gets weirder and weirder, and just things you don't expect happening all the time. It is just, those are two things that are really bizarre to me. So anyhow, I can see I already lost a person because I said something semi-conservative. I'm not a conservative. I'm a leftist, I promise. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and our friend Steve has said I could talk to you guys about this, but just found out that he has stage 4 cancer, and that's not a positive not a positive thing, obviously. And Steve Pieters and I'm just going to ask you all, like, if you pray, please let's get people together who pray for Steve. I don't pray that much, but this has gotten me back to actually praying and lifting Steve up. And, one of the reasons and one of the things I've been doing with this is, Steve's been like another family member to me, like like an adopted father figure. And, I don't know, this is just tough because this, my mom also who had stage 4 cancer, and it brings back a lot of hard things, and it's really hard on him. He's really going through a hell of a lot. He's getting treatment right now. And just ask everybody in the community and this part of this, listening to this and share this with your friends, is to please pray for Steve. He's pretty sick, and he is a living miracle. He's lived through a lot. And one of the things I've been trying to kind of think about through this is just like, what would my mom do? How would my mom handle this situation? And so it's strange because I've also been studying more Hegel, and it's actually kind of like my faith has really been like revived from Hegel, So it's interesting how that works, how like reading like philosophy gets your faith to change, And also thinking about my mother, I think I talked about this 2 weeks ago. One of the things that really allowed my mom to love people so much was that she had this faith, she had this like really cool faith, and she really believed in people and really loved people so much. And I think that's why they're making musicals about her and things, because I think she got Christianity at such a deep level of what it really was. And, you know, she was a realist in a lot of ways. I don't think people realize that, but, you know, she would often give me very common sense answers to tough problems. And I think you'll see a lot of that when our doc comes out about what a neat lady she was, not just what you see in the press or reading books and things like that, but who she was personally. And so I talked to Steve on the phone last night, and I said, you know, I don't know how to be like the positive, like my mom was always this positive force in people's lives. I said, and he said he was feeling scared, and I said, well, I can be scared with you. I can be there with you. I can feel that with you, and that's, you know, my place there. I don't think I've ever been the average, like what people want to call a pastor, and I don't like to use that term for my work anymore. But for me, I've always been more of like I can mourn. It's easier for me to mourn with people and to worry with people and to share those go through that with them. I've never been the one who's. It's always hard for me to see the bright side. But it's also nice when you see the bright side. And if anybody's seen miracles in their life, it's Steve. So be praying for him and his loved ones right now. And I want to see him beat this thing really, really bad. Anyhow, so please, he's a big part of this. He's been such a help to me over the past couple of years when things have seemed to fall apart. He's been there. And so, yeah, anyhow. Here we are today. We're going to talk a little bit about the church and about the tradition of the Christianity tradition. And maybe this will be old hat for some of you, new hat for others. For me, this is kind of a thing of what I've been getting out of I've been listening to a lot of Todd McGowan. He's a philosopher, and I've been listening to a lot of his podcasts recently. Podcasts are really great for dyslexic people. And listening to his podcasts about Hegel's faith and about contradiction and, even psychoanalysis. And it's been really, really fantastic. And so that also mixed with this book I've been reading about Hegel, about Paul Tillich's life. A friend of his wrote a book about his life. And reading about Tillich's life, it has been really great because it's really personalized this great theologian for me to see like what he struggled with and what he went through. And even him dealing with the loss of his own mother was very related to that. Because he said he felt like his world kind of fell apart when his mother passed. And honestly, I feel like, I've been kind of floating in like purgatory or something ever since my mother died. So that's what those are the folks that have inspired today's conversation. And of course, the good old Bible. Unorganized religion is what I'm going to call this. No, I don't know what we're going to call this. Josh names them, and I like what he names them. But what I mean is when I say unorganized religion, it's so funny. We used to like have different things like destroying religion since 1994 or unorganized religion. I think we had one tagline that said unorganized religion or disorganizing religion since 1994. I always think of Beavis and Butthead, and they're in this 7-Eleven, I think, and they go, we're just here to break stuff. So yeah, sometimes I feel like that. And I'm not here to break stuff. I'm here to hopefully give us what I like about Pete Rollins' work is in radical theology is that it seems to always go like come back and get a wider shot of biblical stuff, of the biblical text, of the ideas and the thoughts, and it kind of embraces it a bit more in a way that allows us all to kind of have this clear thought rather than just like in there looking at the text like that. Because that's how I like to look at the texts, you know. That's how I like to do scholarship, is get in, get out the word studies and all this stuff, and but then you got to kind of back things up a little bit and see what's being said in these stories and in these letters, and and so that's what we're going to do today. So one of the things I'm going to start with, and this is what was interesting to me, is because I was listening to this talk about Hegel and how he was drawn to this idea of Christianity. And what really drew him to the idea of Christianity was God was humiliated on the cross. This humiliation of God, that God shares in this suffering with us somehow, that God is humiliated on the cross. Also, this idea of this love that seems to be really powerful. This concept, he felt like, of Christianity had this really cool concept of love, and I agree. And why he kind of subscribed to this idea. And he did this later in his work, because originally he just put religion, he thought Christianity was just like every other religion, but somehow through his work, Christianity became kind of special to him. And it's special to me, but of course I was raised in it as well. But one of the things they were talking about is that Todd McGowan was talking about was this idea that Hegel wasn't so much drawn to this idea of organized religion, like this big machine that I think a lot of us think of when we hear the word church nowadays. Like it's a machine, and all the different cogs and all the different denominations are, even if they don't seem to work together sometimes, even if they're the opposite, they're still kind of like disagreeing in all the places and doing the things. And it's like this machine, this organization. A lot of us grew up with it, where it was a place that we went to on Sunday and maybe Wednesday and maybe Wednesday night even. But this idea that when in Matthew 18:20, where it says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I'm there. I will be there. And what's interesting about this, and it's just a kind of a throwaway verse if you're reading it within its context, there's other things being said about judgment and binding and loosing and all this kind of stuff in Matthew 18. And so Matthew 18:20 is not just for tiny churches anymore. It's not just for little revolutions. But where 2 or 3 are gathered together, I am there. And I think one of the revolutionary ideas about this is because it's talking about binding and loosing and forgiving and people who've made mistakes in the church and all this kind of stuff. Bringing a few people together, having a conversation, and the Spirit is there. But for a lot of us, I don't know if we grasp the idea of how the Spirit came, of what we would be known as the Holy Spirit, or, the Holy Ghost, if you grew up evangelical, Southern evangelical. This 2 or 3 gathering together. And it's kind of a revolutionary idea. And so I'm going to go through a few verses right now that kind of wake us up to the reality of what this really means. And that this kind of thinking is a bit radical, and it's a bit unorganized religion. And when Jesus comes in, he really does, like, I think and I didn't even plan this in my talk, but I think when we think of when he goes to the temple and he flips the tables, which were probably just actually rugs on the ground, but when he throws the rugs and makes a whip out of the rope and all that stuff, when he does that, he's changing things. He's breaking an organization. He's breaking tradition. He's angry that they're saying that they're sacrifices that are sold in the temple are better than other people's sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. So any virtue signaling or things like that, any pride or any secret way of getting in, Jesus is saying, no, this isn't how it is. And he turns everything upside down. Now, this is kind of crazy because, we live in a place where if you went into a church and you started flipping tables, you would be seen as a madman and asked to be taken out of the, out of the church, probably be banned from the property, and that type of thing. And we've become this very, the church has become this very, weird legalistic idea of rules and regulations and debate based on what denomination it is, or based if it's conservative or if it's progressive. We have different rules and regulate different ideas and things like that. But we've got a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, a lot of order, and it seems like Christ came and kind of just threw things out. I said, well, you've heard it said, hate your enemy. I say, love your enemy. You've heard it. I say, and made things a lot different. Change things, I always think about when the Joker in The Dark Knight's talking to Batman, he goes, you've changed things, You've made things different. And that's one of the things of when Jesus is saying 2 or 3 are gathered together. When I was thinking about the traditional church, and I was thinking, what's cool is I had a buddy from Atlanta. Well, not Atlanta. He lives in Chicago now, but one of my original staff members came into town, and we hung out. His name's Brent Kaysen, and we were just talking about Revolution Atlanta and what we did in Atlanta, and hindsight's 2020. And when I look back at the work we did in Atlanta, I'm really proud of that work. And I'm going to tell you some reasons why and some ways that I wasn't even able to see it through some of this talk. But, there were other churches around us. And I remember there were these great churches that had coffee shops in them and meetup groups and an internet cafe. This was back in the day. I don't even think I was online yet. We were on, Revolution was online, but I was not on any social media at this point. Internet, all this stuff. So you could come there, you could work there during the week, you could do all this stuff. And I was I remember being really kind of jealous of these different communities that had all this cool stuff. Because Revolution would just meet in places that would have us. So we met in the Masquerade, which is a nightclub in Atlanta. We met there for a long time. We met in the Star Bar once. We met in all these different bars all over town. We met in coffee shops, we met in the homeless ministries, and wherever we could meet, over time, we moved around town, but we were there and we were part of the community. And what I didn't realize is how powerful that was for us to be in a community and to be part of a community and not be the community. And what I was kind of jealous of were these other communities that were churches that were building community with just in that church. And then you went outside, you lived your life, and then that was your main community. And for Revolution, we were part of community. And here is, looking back, I go oh man, that was really great that we were doing that we were part of a community. We were spending time and holidays. And my friend Chuck was coming home and staying with my mom and me over Thanksgiving and my family, and his girlfriend would come and we'd hang out together, and he never came to Revolution Church. I think he came to a couple shows, but the idea was that we weren't just this meeting on a week. We weren't just this, we were in a community. We weren't the community. And I think that's the issue, is we often look at the church to be a community, and somehow we thought we are the community. But what you see is when Jesus is saying there's 2 or 3 are gathered together, he's saying, you don't have to be in the temple. You don't have to be in these places of worship. And I'm going to show you that a little bit further. So, you think about all these old traditional churches that have the buildings and the coffee shops and the water slides. Oh, wait, water slides. That's just me, I think. But, these places that we go to, almost like church is like a retreat or like a center of worship. And I started thinking about the woman at the well and John, which I'm always surprised that the woman at the well's story is in John for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's because John, that's one of my favorite stories, but John's not one of my favorite books. But what I love is my friend Reverend Vince. John is his favorite gospel. Have you guys seen that meme where it's like the conservative golfer and it's like the Gospels, and then it's like this crazy guy who looks like Santa Claus in a flower kind of suit, and it says the Gospel of John. It's pretty good. But I was thinking about the story of the woman, the Samaritan woman at the well. And then in John 4:21, Jesus is sitting there and he's talking to her. I might even go up a little bit before that. Yeah, let's go to half of 19 and over to 20. So the Samaritan woman goes, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on the mountain, but you say that the places where people must worship is in Jerusalem." And listen to this, and this is really great. And what's really great about this is who Jesus is telling this to. Like, this is who he's revealing this brand new truth to, is this woman at the well who's there in the middle of the day because she's an outcast to a community. So this is another flip of the tables, guys. Like, everybody wants to just focus like, well, then Jesus got mad and he flipped the tables. Jesus is always flipping the tables. When Jesus says, you've heard it said, when he's saying the verses said, the prophet said, but I say, he's flipping tables, okay? Jesus is unorganizing things that have been organized. And the problem is we are like, we're like that, control needing worker, comes in, I listen to this nighttime, bedtime story with my kids about this. It's a little like, it's a classroom pet, and there's this one teacher who always comes in the classroom and it makes everybody, she blows whistles, and she's always like, this classroom is not clean enough. It needs to be more clean. There are kids running in the hall. She's always trying to keep everything in control and perfect and structured, and she's always giving the other teachers a hard time. And I think that we're often like that in the church. Is like Jesus goes, and then we go, all right, well, we got to set everything up. Maybe set it up a little bit different, but now this is the way it's going to be set up from now on. Like, we just love to be like, listen to all these talks about getting rid of the law, and then we like to just set up a brand new law because, oh, well, this is what Jesus said, so this must be the new law, or this is the fulfillment of the law, and so now we're just going to create a new law. And if you read like the Apostle Paul, he doesn't have a whole lot good to say about the law. And even Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish law, I came to fulfill the law. But to fulfill something means you fulfilled it, it's done, you've worked it out. But we like this structure, and that's often what legalism can do, is we create a structure and then we create rules, and it's who's in and who's out. And then we need a reformation. That's why Phyllis Tickle used to say every 500 years there needs to be a big reformation. The church needs to have a garage sale and get rid of the stuff that doesn't work anymore. And so here we are. And so Jesus is talking to this woman who's an outcast, and he's saying, she goes, and you say people must worship in Jerusalem. And Jesus says to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Now, okay, we get that. But he goes, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor Jerusalem. So Jesus is saying, it's not about these places. The time is coming where it's no longer about these places. You'll just worship. You don't. These facilities, these special holy spots, are done. This time's coming, and he's revealing this to her, and this is like a huge revelation. And we can take this for granted because we've grown up reading this kind of stuff and hearing these type of stories. But what I'm trying to invite you to do is have a radical theological moment with me, to have put on your glasses and see it in a new way, or take off your glasses, see it in a new way. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more blurry than all structured and together. So, and I'm thinking about this going like buildings and days and all these things that we build, and I even think for my father, when he was, building Heritage USA and PTL and all these things, it was like this idea that he felt like he had to do something for God, and he had to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And what I realized was like kind of the opposite, and I did this kind of just haphazardly, was I got to just not have a place. You know, I mean, Jesus didn't have a place to lay his head. You know, Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman because he had to go through the Samaria. He had to stop there at the woman at the well. He had to go to these different places. Jesus never is saying like, oh, I've set up a house now, a house church that you guys can all come and see me once a week and we can have a conversation. Usually Jesus have a conversation, and then in the middle of the conversation, he'll often walk away or go do something else. He's at a party. He's having dinner with tax collectors. You know, he's walking to Jerusalem. He's going to these different places. He's praying on a mountain. You know, I mean, there's all these different places that Jesus is like the church on the move, church in the wind. I used to go to a biker church called Church in the Wind in Arizona when I was younger. You know, sometimes I feel like we have this fear that if we don't have this habit, if we don't have this tradition, if we don't have a practice, like this constant practice, we'll lose God. We'll lose this concept of loving others. We'll lose this concept of a bigger truth. We'll lose this concept of grace. You know, if we don't have this tradition, this mode of being constantly to move in. But what I want you to think about is if our faith is based on big communities and buildings and traditions and practices, is it really faith? Is it really that which is greater than ourselves? Is it really something that's infinite? Or is it just this temporal thing that allows us to feel a certain way? You know, like I remember when I was I was speaking in Mexico, and I wanted to go look at some of the churches. And, you know, and you go into these churches and they're gold and they have like these weird wax people behind glass that are like supposed to represent dead people and stuff. And, you know, and I'm walking through and I had my hat on and the nun comes up and she goes, "You're gonna have to take your hat off," you know. Of course, she had her head covered and I wanted to go all sorts of scriptural with that, but I didn't. I took my hat off, you know, when in Rome. And it felt really special, you know, the incense is burning, it smells good, there's candles, there's all this kind of stuff going around. And it's not much different. I mean, it's like a God museum. And it's not that different in evangelical churches. They just have bigger places. They usually like big warehouses and things like that, but they have the coffee shop and the different things, the traditions and the worship and the music, and we all face a certain way and pray a certain way and sing a certain way. We still have these things that we feel like really connect us. But what I'm saying is these things are great. I don't have any problem with those tools. But what I'm saying is these aren't things that we need to connect us. Revolution's really never had music. We've never had music. You know, and I get texts and emails from you guys all the time telling me what a difference that being a part of Revolution has meant in your life. You know, when I was doing Revolution, I was also in a band, and there was times I would be playing with my band in a bar, and like the bartender would come up and say, "Hey, you know, I'm going through this. I don't really pray, but would you pray for somebody for me?" You know, and things like that. And that was just being out there in the community. And I really wish I would have understood this a little bit more when I was in it. Because to me, I look back and go, that's what we were called to do. We were called to be like, I always think about Mayberry, you know, and you've got the town store, the barber shop, the town drunk, the sheriff's office, you know, everybody's got kind of like their thing because it's this community. And you have a church, so you often go to church on Sunday. "Oh, Aunt B made the apple pie for Sunday church," you know, whatever, after church. And everybody's in the community. And that's what I was thinking, is that we all need to be a part of like this community of humanity, and we can bring the Spirit with us. And I think this is what's kind of cool, because I've never been I don't talk a lot about the Holy Spirit. You know, I don't think you usually hear me talk, but today I'm going to talk about that. And because I realize that this is a big part of what Jesus was saying to this woman at the well. But he's saying, you know, something's about to happen, something big is going to happen. It's not going to matter where you worship, it's not going to matter where you are. And in a way, you know, I say, "Oh, we want to be Christ-like," and then we shut ourselves in a building and don't hang out with anybody. Like, as a teenager, I remember, and even when I started Revolution, I remember one of the pastors at Revolution was like, Jay, you're always hanging out at these coffee shops and hanging out with people and doing all this stuff. I don't know, man. It's a slip. You could get yourself in trouble going out there all the time. We should focus on the service. And I always felt like the majority of what I did was being away from that building. The best conversations I had was away from the building, the best relationships I made. And the same was with Revolution. I mean, yeah, I gave some good talks at these different places. I'm not going to lie. I was happy with a lot of my conversations, a lot of the talks I gave. But the majority of the work we did was outside of the building. And it wasn't like, oh, we're going to save all these people. It was just, we're going to love people. And we're going to be there, and we're going to, we're just going to let our lives speak. And we're going to love people and be in their lives and care about them. And in my own way, it was kind of this reformation of showing what the church could be, what Christianity could be. It could be something that moves outside of the four walls. It could be something that moves outside of a denominational setting. It's something that moves outside of that. So Jesus is telling, there's not going to be any more special places. I was thinking buildings and days, like, we have Sunday is the day we all get together, But I remember there was times where Revolution had to meet on Wednesdays, we had to meet on Thursdays, we met on Tuesdays. The day never seemed to really make a difference. And one of the other things I was thinking about is like, I've seen a lot of people, there's a lot of gurus out there, and there's a lot of people doing hallucinogenics and stuff, and oh man, I did this, special, I don't know what they call the hallucinetics anymore, but I don't pay that much attention to it, but people doing, they're like, oh, we're going to find God, and you can find God if you take this ketamine, or if you take this, or whatever. And for me, like when I did hallucinogenics and did drugs and all the things, that's not where I found God. Where I found God, where God showed up to me, whatever that is, the ground of being, or love, or hope, or that which is, that which is outside of existence, whatever you want to say, it showed up to me within those moments of suffering. Also in those moments of like coffee shops and bars, and, bars mostly, in, one-on-one in-person conversations, it wasn't during a worship service, or it wasn't in a beautiful building, or it wasn't, in a small group. And I'm not saying those are wrong, but what I'm saying is that we've got to not let that. So for me, what I was thinking during that time in Atlanta, which was probably between 98 to 2005, 2006, what I was always thinking and feeling nervous about, it's funny because there would be legalistic Christians that I didn't like to be around, because I actually felt bad. Like I felt like I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that I didn't like them. It was that I actually felt shame in my own life. But I also knew that shame wasn't something that probably should come out of this belief system at the time. And of course, my faith was a lot different at that time as well. But this constant like jealousy of the churches that are meeting and that had buildings and did all these things, why I was just like this guy moving around with my staff, and we were just, we had our friend Stu Damron let us have an office in his, where they worked on cars, so we like body shop. So we literally had an office in a body shop. And most of our meetings always took places in bars and pubs, like staff meetings and stuff. And I just wish I would have known a little bit more what I know now, and appreciated that time a little bit more, and been like, thank God we're not in those buildings. Thank God we're not stuck there. Thank God we don't have those bills to pay. We're able to move freely with these people and be in a community and be a part of a community and spend time with people who would never step in the doors of a building, never came to a service, And so when I said, like, finding God, I found God in the midst of hell. I mean, when people came to me and said, hey, I've had this happen a couple times where I was at bars and either managers or bartenders asked me to pray with them, which seems odd, but, or pray for them or pray for a family member. They were going through hell. They were going through a rough time. They were scared, and they were saying, I'm reaching out to even the unknown at this point. I'm desperate. What's out there? And I was able to be there and be a part of that. and how grateful I am now and honored I am to have had those moments with those people and those people's lives and look back at that with great. Also, I remember like in Revolution, New York, you take the train everywhere. And so I'd see people from Revolution, from the services, the community there that would meet on Sundays. And people would get really nervous sometimes when they see me because they hadn't been to the service in a while. Like, oh man, sorry, I haven't been to church in a while. I'm like, no. Revolution isn't a place that you need to worry about being at every week. We're there when you need us. Like, it's not, where no one's going to make you feel guilty. I don't ever want anybody to feel guilty or feel bad for not being here or not watching or not being a part of that. That's not how I feel that we're called to operate. I don't feel like that's what Christ showed me. I don't feel like that's what Paul shows me. I don't believe that that's what the New Testament shows me when Christ comes, is that it's not about that. We're here. We love you. We accept you. You are accepted if you're here or not. And I think that's something that we don't grasp a lot of in the church today. It's hard for us. It's hard for us to not, I guess what I'm doing is I'm just going to kick back a little bit against some of these traditions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with them. And in some ways, I think some of them are very important and really beautiful. I mean, I wear, saints and stuff like that. I got praying hands, and all that stuff. I like it. It's cool. I appreciate it. But it's not a necessity. And that's pretty cool. So John 16, we're going to go back over to John and John 16 is really cool too. And I think this answers the question of why, why did Jesus die? What happened? Why was there this humiliation of God on a cross, dying like a common criminal, cursed hanging on a tree type of thing? And I was reading in John 16, and 16, 4. I did not say those things to you from the beginning because I was with you, but now I am going to him who sent me. Jesus is resurrected. He's back. He's getting ready to go back to heaven or wherever. Yet none of you asked me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your hearts. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the advocate, which is the Spirit, will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you, and where he comes, he will prove the world wrong about sin, and righteousness and judgment. About sin, because they do not believe in me. About righteousness, because I am going to the Father, and you will see me no longer. About judgment, because the rulers of this world have been condemned. Now, rulers of this world, let's stay focused on that for a second. 12, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. And I find this is extremely interesting. I cannot say them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. For will not speak of his own, but will speak whatever he hears. I'm sorry, these pronouns are in the Bible. I'm just reading the Bible, just word for word. And he will declare to you these things that are to come. He will glorify me because we'll take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. For this reason, I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. So, Jesus is saying, I got to go. The resurrection, what the resurrection does, and I feel like we don't do this also enough in the church, is points back to the crucifixion. It points back to the death. It's like Jesus saying, this is why I died. This is what happened. This was the humiliation. This is, we always like, he won, and he got up, and he said, here I am, and that's not what's really happening here. He's saying, I got to go. I'm still going. I may have won over death, but I'm still going. So you can have the Spirit. You can have that inner peace. You can have that acceptance. You can have this no longer feeling that you need to have a special place to go to talk to God, or have to have a special prayer, or a special sacrifice, or any of these things. I've got to go because all I have is yours. And for me to give that to you, I can't be here. Now, that's a pretty amazing statement to these guys at this point. I said that this will take what is mine and declare it to you. And it's strange because like recently I just had one of the talks I gave a couple weeks ago, we put up a clip and I was talking about love and God being love and all this stuff. And I think it's 1 John. And I got this like really angry legalistic pastor who's like, what about this verse? What about this verse? And so I went and looked at his Facebook page and it was all about judgment and wrath and condemnation. Obviously he believes in atonement theory. And what I couldn't grasp was like, how are you obsessed with, praying for the wrath over, I think it was like LA. I pray that God's wrath comes over LA and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, how can you say that when you think, it always goes back to this, was Jesus' death not good enough? Was if that's where you think the wrath was going, then why is there still wrath left? Why is this, it's like nothing is quite good enough. Like they give all these supernatural, wild ideas and magical thinking, yet it's not consistent. And for me, I like consistency. Even though some of this stuff is wild to talk about and hard to grasp, I still like to have somewhat of consistency. I mean, that's why I study philosophy, is because it might seem insane at the beginning, but then it starts to click together and there's like consistency there. And then they go, contradiction. And then there's truth above contradiction. And you go, how does this work? And you keep reading and studying. And you go, oh my God, there it is. The dialectic is true. It really works. So much to the point where I went to therapy called dialectic therapy, like embracing two opposites and coming together in the higher truth and helping me feel better and accept this life better. So all these different things. But why, so here we are is we look at the reaction of the temple. But we also have to look at resurrection as temporary. We always, resurrection is eternal. Jesus said, I am here, but I'm leaving. And it points back to the death. But that death is what gives us the Spirit. And I don't think we get that. I don't think we understand that. I don't think we quite grasp that idea. That when we talk about grace, when we talk about you are accepted, when I talk about that tillich, you're accepted no matter who you are and what you're all, the Bible even talks about it. So, when we talk about those hard truths, we don't realize that it comes from these type of things. Like Jesus saying, it doesn't matter where you worship anymore. You don't have to have these buildings. You don't have to have these groups. You don't have to have these organizations. Everybody was like, I feel like we're always like putting together books to be like, this is how you find God, And one of the things that philosophy and radical theology has been for me is not how I find God, but how I learn to embrace the lack and the lack of God as well. And that Spirit sometimes for me is the mustard seed, the tiny thing, the grace and the love that moves beyond something that I understand. So Jesus, here's the Spirit, and what we learn from Paul, even when you go further down this, and what Jesus is saying here, and what we learn through Paulinian theology, teaching is there's no location, there's no priests, there's no favorites, and really there's no in and out. Now, we want to say there's an in and out, but if you really go through those things, that's never up to you. We're always called to love our neighbor. Oh, love your neighbor as yourself, but your neighbor is also your enemy. Do pray for those who persecute you. It's like Jesus flips those tables, flips the rules, flips the law, and then says, there's things that you're going to hear, but you're not ready to hear. So like, even if you like just look at that there, but then just go to Paul, you see things happening. You see that this idea of the inclusion of faith gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and people go, oh, you guys are just letting everybody in. Oh, you're just trying to make the Bible say what you say. Well, this is, I still have things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. And then we see Paul saying, well, Gentiles are in, man. We're all together. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female. We're all one in Christ. Paul's saying all this stuff. And this is, So we don't need the gold, no gold rooms, no museums of God. We don't, it's like, I also think about the Rock and Roll Museum, and they show all these things, and they always show like, oh, they got Joe Strummer's guitar, and they got, the Clash, they got the Sex Pistols drum set and all this stuff. But the thing that's missing is the people. It's like, oh, there's a shirt they wore. Oh, they wore that shirt. Oh, that's so cool. But really, it's like, but what's missing is the music. The person, the creativity. That's not there. It's just like you're looking at like just things that passed by greatness. And I feel like often the church is like, oh, look, someone painted this. Oh, we got this. And it's just like we're like these mausoleums to God, these mausoleums to religion, the mausoleums to your denomination. How to be taught how to be a good follower of a denomination and a perfect thought, but not how to be a human being, not how to live within community. Often I feel like we actually teach people I remember one time I said mental masturbation. I said, it's a bunch of mental masturbation at this Christian festival. And they were so worried about my speaking that they had one of their head guys come and speak with me. And I said that, and he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that. And I'm like, how are Christians supposed to be the most naive people in the world? And why would we create our children to be naive, and then we go to school and we say all these things, oh my gosh, and we hear about sex, and we're, oh my gosh, I'm so shocked. And then we leave church and we go crazy because we're like, oh my gosh, because we've been taught to be naive. These are bad, stay away, and you go, wait, this seems to be like humanity. These seems to be very human things. This escapism, this wanting to fill this lack, and all these things seem to be this experience of living life and learning how to live life. Yet you're saying, I need to be the naive one, when we should be the least naive of them all. I think that was one of the things that was great about Dr. King and people like that, is they weren't naive. And we build a Christianity of naivete, and, oh, we're all innocent. We all have our stuff. It's like, this is not humanity. This is just learning to be naive to the point where we can't think for ourselves, and we can't, or even our convictions become other people's convictions, and we go into groupthink rather than our own think. And now it's not 2 or 3 gathered together, it's 500 gathered together, or 30 gathered together, or 50 gathered, and we get into that group think. And I don't think this is what we're being called to. I don't think we need to build more temples. I don't think we need to be escaping. I don't think we need to hide away from the world. People say, well, we've got to be separate from the world. We're going to do that. Just if you try to love your enemies, you're going to be separate. If you love your enemies' enemies, you're really going to be separate. I'm gay affirming, but I've also said positive things about conservatives, and I've pissed both sides off. And it's very often that now I get more angry friends on my progressive side than I do my conservative side, but luckily I still get the conservative ones because they're the more fun to argue with, to be honest with you. They're easier to argue with often. But unless they're Calvinists, those guys are smart, but they're still fun to argue with. But this idea of like, if you do these things, there's going to be a separation. If you're true to who you are, there's going to be a separation. There's a reason they're doing like a musical. Elton John is writing a musical about my mother as a Christian. Now, most people go, oh, she was so crazy and she wore the makeup and she was so wild. But like, oh, you should have a movie out where a woman won an Oscar for pretending to beat her. Now there's a musical out by one of the top musicians in the world, writing songs about her. What does that say? And what does the Bible say? Well, you'll know you belong to me for your love for one another. Why are they doing plays about my mother and movies about my mother? Is because she seemed to love people in a way that people can't grasp, because she seemed to love beyond titles, beyond faith, beyond conservative or progressive or whatever. She just loved people through those lines. And so now people are celebrating her life because they saw this love. Now, if that is what we're known for being Christians, and I would say my mom is a Christian. You can look at people like my mom and what she did and how she loves people, in this country, you can look at Mother Teresa and what she did. I'm not saying they're the same, but I'm just saying, like, you can see people who really love, and that they don't, and how you tell that they love is that they don't have one group that they subscribe to only loving. They're not free from doubt. They're not free from the bullshit. They're not free from crying or being silly or being made fun of. But they triumph, love triumphs through those life experiences. And that's how you see, so Mr. Rogers, prime example. I would even say Pee Wee Herman, because that's my Mr. Rogers. So you've got these figures that people see this grace, or they see this love that Jesus talks about, this love that the religion of Christianity talks about here. And funny thing is none of these, Mr. Rogers, he had a studio, but my mom didn't really have a building at the end of her life. Mother Teresa was all over the place, didn't have a building. And I'm not saying I'm anti-building at all. If you got a building, good for you. I'm just saying, like, how we think about what the church is. And Jesus saying it's two or three people. It's moving outside. It's being with people. Pee Wee had his playhouse, I guess. Yes, you're correct. The holiest of holies. One more thing, and then I'll let you guys go, because we've almost been going for an hour. Mark 15. I should get a pulpit. I should also get a couch that doesn't lower over time. It's like memory foam or something. That'll be our next fundraiser. Help Jay get a firm couch. Mark 15, where are you? And so here's back at the cross with Christ. We're back on the cross. Jesus is crucified. And one of the things I'm going to say, this is totally off the cuff, but one of the things is, I remember one of these churches that I was really kind of envious over. A friend of mine came to me and was working there, was volunteering there. They used to work with me, and they went to work at this church, and I think that was another reason I was like, oh, I'm even losing my staff to these people. And then they came to me and said, hey, I'm coming out. I'm coming out of the closet. And I was like, okay, that's cool. That's great. And he's like, but I don't think my church is going to let me work there anymore or volunteer there anymore. And I'm like, well, I know the pastor. Let me meet with him and see what we can do. And I met with the pastor. And the pastor made it very clear that no, he wouldn't do that. And I said, well, if you don't let my friend serve, there's probably done with church, I'd say. Probably done with this faith in a way. And his thing was that his rules were more important than the person. That's how I feel about it. That his convictions were more important than the person. And I often feel like that's a big test in how you love in Christianity, is when you start, if you put this in front of people, this book in front of people, when you start putting Christianity in front of people, and I know people are like, well, it doesn't say abandon your mother. Just hear me out. People who want to be there, and you go, no, you can't be here. No, you can't volunteer here because you're not good enough, or because you don't follow the right rules, or you don't. That's a law. It just is. This is what laws do. Is they'll say, hey, this is the law, this is the rule, and if you don't meet it, you can't be here. And that's okay. People are free to do that. Again, I spent years of my life trying to get the church to change their mind on things, and they didn't want to, and I guess that's their prerogative. And some did, which was fantastic as well. But this church didn't, and my friend left, and we stayed friends. We're still friends. But they're pretty much done with the church at that time. I don't know what they're doing now with churches, or if that's even in their life. But I'm grateful that I was in a place where I was able to say, no, you should break your own rule, because people are important. Because this person is more important than your theology. They worked for me, and they always told me that they were gay and struggle. And I said, listen, at the time I wasn't out as affirming. Hadn't come out and said that, but in my head I told myself, listen, if you, my idea was like, if you want to be gay, be gay. If you don't want to be gay, then then you can figure that out. But you're always accepted here. And I'm also grateful that that was part of my work as well. I'm grateful that I became affirming. I'm not going to force anybody to be anything they don't want to be, but I'm going to let people be who they are, and let them work that out in their own faith, in their own understanding, their own tradition, in their own walk. I've just decided that I'm not the end-all judge-all. So maybe that's why I don't like being called a pastor, because I can't tell people how they have to be and don't have to be. I can just tell people you're accepted. And that's why I preach grace. That's why I believe in grace. And maybe I'm a preacher and not a pastor. I don't know. But Mark 15:37. And so then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last breath. And the curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, the reason I wanted to share this with you is because the temple and the curtain, behind the curtain, was supposedly where the Holy of Holies were. And, the priests would tie ropes to their leg in case they were in sin and died in the presence of God so they could be pulled out. No one could go behind there except the special priests. The sacrifices were made. This is a special place. That's where God is. God's behind the curtain. Very Wizard of Ozzy. And so when Jesus dies, the curtain splits. And I like how people always talk about how thick the curtain was, so they can be like, God was really he was like a power team member, and he ripped that big old thick curtain apart. Jesus, even if it was a paper, the curtain ripping on its own is pretty phenomenal. But what's even more phenomenal is there was nothing behind the curtain. So for me, I always felt like Christ came to let us know we are not separated. I'm here. I'm going to give you the Spirit. You've never really been separated, but I'm going to leave you the Spirit, and you're going to be more connected. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to go to this temple. You don't have to have things go behind a curtain. You don't have to reverence a mystery. There's nothing behind it. There's no God gas. There's no every pair of sunglasses you ever lost. None of that. There is nothing. There's nothing separating you. There's nothing. So you don't have to come to the special building and get the special sacrifices and do the special things and make the curtain rip and sing special songs, singing, Jesus is my boyfriend, or Jesus is my girlfriend, or Jesus is my friend, or whatever. You don't have to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like Paul would talk about the law, you can do it, but if you think it's doing anything for you, that's when it becomes a problem. When you think that it makes you better than somebody else, that's when it becomes a problem. When you think that it's the only way, that's when it becomes a law and a problem, and and it becomes heresy, really. But we like our traditions, we like our setups, we like to, well, I go in this way and this makes me feel God. Well, of course it does, because that's the tradition of what we say godly is. But what I want to be is like an adventurer and put on my adventure hat and go out and see where God is. And I find that God's in the cracks. God's in the suffering. God's not usually there in the ecstasy for me. And that's okay, because that's, we're all different parts of the body, right? And when I say God is in the cracks, I mean, it's really that idea that God is this ground of being, that there's something there. It's so funny, because I used to get so mad at John Caputo because he says, God does not exist, God insists. And I used to hate that and think it was like some sort of trick on words. And I was like, oh, those philosophers, and they're tricky words, and it doesn't make any sense. And now it starts to make sense, but it made sense. It's taken me years for it to make sense. So I can't try to make sense to you all now, because it's taken me, because I had to learn, I had to read more, and I had to do more, and I had to put in the hard work. Every time I'd ask Pete to give me an introduction to his work so I could understand it all, he goes, you can't get an introduction to understand it all. You have to do the work. You have to read the books. You have to put in the time. And so that's what I've had to realize. I have to put in the time to get these really tough concepts. So tough that I can't even bring them down to my, I can't bring them down, because they're just, I'd have to do like 18 talks just on that. Anyhow, so you see what I'm saying? That curtain is split. There's no separation there. So it's not about the building. It's not about the location. It's not about the community. It's not about these things. And why I brought all this together is I'm saying, look, I've done it. The most successful I think I've ever been in my life was at a time when I thought I wasn't successful at all, when I thought everybody else around me was doing it right and I was doing it wrong. And now I look back and go like, oh my God, I was doing it right. And I was in the right neighborhood at the right time, in the right place, everywhere. And I was a part of a community that I'm grateful to be a part of. And it wasn't a church community, it was just a community. And I was just one of the people there in the community who happened to run the church rather than, the piercing parlor. Okay? That was it. And we were friends, and we spent holidays together, and we did funerals together, and we grieved together, and we celebrated together, and we rejoiced together, and we even sometimes prayed together. And we joked together, and we made bad jokes together, and we did silly things, and, half the time our staff retreats were so crazy. I was the only sober one there. It was like, but we were just living life the best we all could, coping with what we're doing. And it's so funny now to see some of the people who are on my staff who are like in 12-step programs, things like that, because that's where the journey was. And I just was like, you're on a journey. I want to help you on this journey, but I can't make you do this or this or that. And I feel like that comes from this religion. Like, I feel like that's what I've learned from studying grace. Before I studied grace, I was the same way. I was like, oh yeah, that guy doesn't need to be here in the church, because I knew I didn't need to be there. So I would think, well, they don't need to be here because they're doing this, or they're saying this, or they're thinking this. Even ratting people out on, oh, pastor, did you see so-and-so do such and such? There was a time in my life where I was that way. Because I was under the understanding that it was all about these rules and regulations and these traditions that we did not break and that we had to have because they were somehow sacred. And then you wake up one day and you go, everything is sacred or nothing is sacred, but the fact is either way it works. So for me, sacred can be a conversation like with my buddy Pete at his place where we can't figure out what to do and we're just having a laugh. And we're laughing really hard about dumb shit because we're both so tired that we can't even get ourselves to go to the movie theater or go out. You know what I mean? To do something fun. Or, it might be coming home after a long day or after a good talk and just resting or maybe watching a good movie. I find, sacred, my music is sacred to me. Do you see a lot of Christian bands there? I mean, we got Dr. King there, but, skateboarders and punk rockers and hip hoppers and Sinead and Chris. Those, in some ways, those are the most sacred things to me because these people are tortured individuals dealing with faith and doubt and hope and life and humanity. And I don't want to be a part of a faith that's naive, where I'm hidden away, where I'm behind a curtain, the curtain's split, I can't hide anymore. I'm an introvert, but I still want to hide, so I'm going to hide a lot. But the fact is that I think we're just called to be people. So I think, too, that maybe one of the reasons I gave this talk today was, sometimes I worry about doing just, and here's the thing, okay, what's great about this curtain being ripped? Then in Romans 8:31, what does Paul say about the love of God? About the love of Jesus. What does Paul say in Romans? Nothing can separate you. Not hell, not the heights, not sin, not anything. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. Nothing. Yet we've got preachers, pulling down condemnation on God, and we've got preachers telling people, we've got church people saying, kick your gay family member out, or we've got pastors saying, kick your conservative, Trump-supporting family member out and cut them off. I haven't talked to my dad in 2 years, and it's not up to my own thing. It might be because he's been sick and he had that... he had his stroke. I don't know. But it's not anything I want. Even when I greatly disagree with him on a lot of things, I still want him in my life. I'm sad. I mourn it every day that he's not in my life. I mean, it breaks my heart sometimes. Yeah, my kids don't have a grandfather, and then I don't have my dad. And now Steve's sick. Obviously, I have abandonment issues with life. I've lost a lot of people I love and care about. And so why do this to other people? Why would I return that to other people because they don't vote the way I do or because they don't have the sexuality I think they should have? Why would I do that? Why do we do that? Because that's not a love that never gives up or never loses faith or is always hopeful that endures through. That's not a love that's a love that separates. You're saying your politics will separate me from you. Your sexuality will separate me from you. Your religion will separate me from you. I mean, how pathetic and how crazy and how far off track have we gotten as a people who are supposed to follow this guy, Jesus, and then this other guy, Paul, and these other folks giving us these words, telling us never to give up, never lose faith, and to go through this together. Yet, the earliest inconvenience, we get rid of them. I mean, that's why I'm so sad about my progressive brothers and sisters, being very woke and canceling people. It's like, so you're saying whatever you canceled them for is that's where love does not penetrate. Love cannot penetrate past that. Love can't penetrate past a mistake or a stupid tweet or something that happened or a sexual disorder or something that was set off the cuff mean when they were having a bad, whatever. I always think about these people who are going crazy during the pandemic and ripping their masks off and yelling at people and thinking like, that's what they're showing online, and I always think like, no kidding, we were all going crazy. They were just expressing their unique way of seeing life and how it was breaking them. And we're saying your brokenness separates you from love. And revolution doesn't want to be a place. So, if my conservative friends are right and I end up in hell and God goes, well, I just say, tell God I took that whole love shit way too much seriously. I don't believe in hell. I don't know if I believe in heaven much anymore. But I believe in living life and living life well, and I believe in following Christ. I believe in following this message, and I have hope. I have a little bit of hope. I have a mustard seed that my mom gave me that I keep inside me that allows me to, when the rubber hits the road and when I don't know what to do about Steve, I'm going to lift up a prayer. If I'm lifting it up to the air, I'm sending it to God in the ground of being. So I'm just saying it's time for us to take a radical look at this. And this is me being as radically transparent and honest with you as possible. So as someone on the other side who's been separated from someone they love, don't do it. If four walls are separating you from loving people, leave. If you're a pastor of a church and you have to let somebody go because you don't agree with certain things, I'm not going to say if they're harming other people or things like that. Obviously, I'm not saying that. Like, oh, they're killing people, I got to keep them around. I'm obviously not saying that. Or they're touching people inappropriately. I'm not saying that. Come on, let's common sense here. But what I'm saying is if it keeps you from loving people who are trying to live life well and not harming other people, and you're saying, get away, because it's a magical sin somehow. If you're doing this, quit. If your denomination makes you quit, give them the building, give them the keys. Go somewhere where you can love people radically. And it won't get you rich. Not even close, probably. But it's worth it. It's worth it. So thanks, everybody, for coming to Revolution today. I hope this touched you in a way that makes you think differently and makes you understand why Revolution is here and why we feel Reformation is important and why I always ask you guys to share these talks with other people, to help this church grow a little bit, or this community grow. Gathering. That's why we call it a gathering. It's 2 or 3 are gathered together. That's why it's Revolution Gathering, because there's usually only 2 or 3 of us. But why ask retweet and share on Instagram, and putting your stories on Instagram, share on your Facebook page, let people know that we're here. Because I know we're all broke most of the time, but those are things you can do for free that help a group of us to have these talks and then maybe go out and live this stuff. And I know you're living it. I know you're doing it. I've seen a lot of your lives change from our conversations and also on the phone. And I know you're doing it. And this is a place to do it. So share it with other people. Help them do it as well. I do believe in that part of my work, and that's what I'm called to do. And I almost got an hour and a half today, so I apologize. But it needed to be said. Now, if you are a wealthy millionaire, Bruce Wayne, and you want to donate to Revolution, you can go to revolutionchurch.com, and the support button is at the top. We put it at the top just because we do need your support financially to continue to do this. We'd like to grow. We'd like to get better. I'd like to have staff. Josh, who helps out a lot, I'd love to hire Josh. I'd love to hire somebody in this town to help me so we could do better communication and better podcasts and things like that. And you can support us and get a tax-deductible receipt. It's almost December, so go crazy and make a donation and get your tax-deductible receipt. All right. Love you guys. We'll see you next week if I don't see you before. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Love you much.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.